Welcome back to the show. As always, I am Chad, and today we are going to be talking to Liz Climo and her book, uh, Life in the Present, a joyful collection of comics about living in the moment. So, when I was looking at it, it was just a nice little collection, and I wanted to find out more about the book and Liz. So let's bring her in and let's do that.
Just got my glasses on right in time. Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fine. So before we get talking about the book itself, tell me a little bit about your career as a cartoonist, or and you know how you got into cartooning to begin with.
Sure. So I actually started my career as in animation. So I got a job on The Simpsons on my 23rd birthday. So
I heard that show's going places.
I think it's really gonna be something. Any day now, it should be. So yeah, I got a job there about 20 years ago, and then I ended up working there for 10, I think like probably like 14 years. I was kind of in and out, but I actually did comics. Like I've always loved comics, and I was always drawing comics when I was little. I really loved like The Far Side, and so that was always sort of my first interest. And then I ended up going to San Jose State studying animation illustration. Didn't end up graduating because I got the job on The Simpsons instead, which was cool. But then when I was on The Simpsons, I kind of set the cartooning aside because I was really trying to figure out how to be an animator.
Mhm.
Because I didn't really get the training in college because I left before I even got into the program. I had to really like figure it out on the job, and so there was a lot of like imposter syndrome and just like where I had to work really hard to sort of prove that I was meant to be there. And so it wasn't until I was there for about 10 years or so that I sort of felt comfortable enough to get back to cartooning, which was my first love. And that's when I started just doing them for fun and posting them online to Tumblr as sort of an accountability exercise. And then the internet decided they liked it. And so I kind of made the shift after it wasn't an immediate like, cool, I can quit it was like years and years. I finally like got the momentum to like really focus on it full time. So yeah, that's the short version.
So, tell me about this book. I know this isn't your first book, but tell
No,
me
yeah,
about it.
yeah. So this was actually my fourth. I've said this so many times, but I still have to think about it for a beat. Like my fourth comic compilation. So I've done some children's books, but this book is the fourth of like a series of books where it's basically the cartoons that you see online, and then so in this particular case, there's 25 comics that I basically have handpicked that I liked that I'd already posted online that for people to see, and then I did 75 brand new ones that I have not shared online. Just so that sort of like if you get the book, then you can actually see those comics. But all the comics are what you see online. This is what the book is like. They're all sort of in the same tone. So yeah, and this book is special to me because it marks essentially 10 years as in publishing. So it's my career in publishing. So yeah.
So, kind of tell us a little bit about the cartoons that comprise the book. I mean, because they're very unique in a way because they're not like the ha ha ha. They're 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 different.
So I like to sort of describe them as just, when I started my career, it was sort of more, I was really trying to push positivity and like making people feel better. I don't really do that anymore. Now it's really more of just like, I like to sort of create a quick sort of just brief happy moment when you're scrolling. And so I like to keep them real short. They're all about two panels. Almost all of them are two panels with the exception of like some, but most of them are two panels. Really, really quick, really simple, always animals. And they're just basically like absurd moments that you might be able to relate to that like, they are animals, but the jokes are really meant for people. And so like people, the sort of interactions that we have as people. But yeah, some of them some of them I think are funnier than others. And some of them are just kind of like, just sweet, but I try to keep them from going into being like too maudlin or too sappy because that's just not really like my vibe, I guess.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's essentially what they are. Just sort of like just a silly moment that you can stop and be like, huh. And my favorite is when people, tag friends or like post and they're like, that's you or that's you, because that's sort of what I want them to be, sort of something that can make you feel good, but also like connect you to the people around you, I guess.
And what was the inspiration for using animals as kind of the characters?
So initially, it was kind of a combination of just liking, preferring to draw animals. But really, when I started doing these in earnest, like and posting them online, I was really trying to get away from The Simpsons, because what happens when you've been working on a particular show for as long as I was, it's really hard to break free of the style because you're doing it every single day. And even now, even when I do like cartoons that have people or more anthropomorphic looking animals, they tend to look more like Simpsons characters than I would like them to. Not that the Simpsons aren't great, but I wanted to sort of, sort of really lean into my own style. And so with
Mhm.
animals, it felt like a very natural way to be like, well, they're not people, they're animals. That's different. And then they have the little, the little dot eyes rather than the round Simpsons eyes. And so that was also another way I could just sort of like differentiate a bit. So that's kind of how it started. But then it was also, it helps. Like I said, like the situational stuff is sort of what I try to do. But with animals, you can find a lot of like jokes just with the differences between animals. Like often there's, an octopus can do 8 things at once, and that could be a funny
Yeah.
joke. That could kind of create a comic out of nowhere. So that's sort of where that came from.
Now, do you have a favorite animal that you kind of like to use, or one that you don't like to draw?
So I use the bear a lot, which wasn't it. That sort of just kind of happened on its own. The bear has sort of just naturally become who I am. So I am a lot like the bear. So I often use him because like, I'm sort of drawing on my own experiences. So I feel like it has to be the bear. I also like drawing the sloth a lot. I just like sloths. I think sloths are funny. I had a really hard time for a long time. I didn't draw dogs or cats because I couldn't figure out how to draw a dog or a cat that was like different enough from there's so many dog and
Hmm.
cat cartoons. But I'm doing that more now. I really don't like drawing monkeys or apes. I just can't draw them very well. And so I tend not to. And big cats, I have a hard time drawing big cats too, although they do sneak in sometimes.
So, how long does it take you to, do let's say a strip, or from writing to the adding the art and stuff?
It depends. I think the writing is often takes the longest. Sometimes I get very lucky and an idea will just come to me. Those always end up being the better ideas too. It's just like it just kind of pops into my head. Something happens and it sparks an idea. But when I do try to keep up the blog and keep up the cartoons even when I'm working on other stuff. And so sometimes that means just sitting and really racking my brain and trying to come up with an idea. And that can take, you know, days sometimes just
Hmm.
trying to
Yeah.
come up with something. The drawing is pretty easy, especially if it's, the joke is just like two animals having a conversation. Maybe one of them's holding something. That doesn't take long at all.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's extra stuff. And like, there's never backgrounds, but sometimes there's like props. For instance, there's a cartoon where a hamster is on the phone and he's like, hang on, I have to go through a tunnel. And then he's going through one of those like little hamster tunnels.
Yeah.
And so that one took a little longer because I was like trying to, it was like I had to actually use perspective and stuff. So anywhere from the drawing part, anywhere from like a half an hour to a couple hours.
I think one of my favorite cartoons in the book is I think it's the sloth and the squirrel, and the sloth is eating a banana and peel it, and the squirrel goes, "You're taking his clothes off."
Yes, that's a book one.
I, I,
It's
I, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's worth mentioning that like so many of these comics and that one in particular, I'm really like I write them down and I'm like, you can't. That's silly. Like no one's gonna think that's funny. That's just so nice. So I like almost didn't even draw that one because it's so silly. But I'm glad that you liked it.
So, what from working on The Simpsons and stuff like that, did you take any lessons or tips away that you're able to use as a cartoonist, doing your own thing?
Definitely. So again, like because the comics are so simple, I'm not using backgrounds. It's very, very like, just two characters, usually a couple characters. one thing I learned working in animation is the importance of like a nice vignette, like staging, like characters, like it's nice to have a nice silhouette. It's nice to not have tangents, just like visually nice things that you don't really notice. You might not notice exactly what's bothering you, but like you notice something's a little jarring, and I like them to look pleasant and kind of like be easy to look at. And so that's something that helped me just visually. And then also because The Simpsons is a sitcom, it's not like a zany Saturday morning cartoon. The acting is usually pretty subtle. And so as a layout artist, I was never writing the jokes. I was just basically getting
Right.
the script, working with the director, and just sort of delivering the acting. And so kind of understanding the importance of subtle acting and just getting straight to the point of a joke, that I think I learned a little bit on the job, because one of the things that I try to do with these comics is like really, take away a lot of the unnecessary stuff and just get right to the point and hopefully right to the joke and make it really clean and really easy to read. And I think that's something I learned working in animation for sure.
So you've also written some, I guess, children's books, Rory the Dinosaur.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you mind talking about that a little bit?
No, not at all. I've written a few children's books. I've illustrated a few children's books. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is writing a children's book's really hard. I think a lot of people, in my experience anyway, especially artists, I know a lot of other artists, a lot of other writers, and it seems like a very natural, like, oh, I'll do that. Like I have an idea, and I know why. I know that impulse because I felt that way too. But it's actually a lot harder than it seems, because you really have to get this like nice, concise, meaningful, or funny or whatever story in this very limited amount of pages. And so it's very fun, but it's also it at least for me it's a little bit more challenging. But I will say publishing in general, children's books especially, like it moves a lot slower than animation. So
Mhm.
I'm very used to, or I used to be like, I have to get something done in 2 hours. And now it's, I'll get an away message that's like, I'm away from my desk until the spring. So it's a bit of a slower process, but
I used to have one at work, and they don't like it.
yeah, yes, exactly. Um, but yeah, I do enjoy, I'm not sure if I should even say this, but it's the truth. I actually, a part of me sort of prefers, or at least needs to have a break, not a break, but like illustrating another author's work
Hmm.
is very helpful for me, because I can, I've not been doing this. I didn't start as a writer, so this I'm sort of still learning about. And so illustrating another author's work is really fun, because it's sort of like that first part is done, and I can really sort of like just tackle the visual stuff, and then also learn from the brilliant writers that I've worked with kind of along the way. So yeah.
So, if you had an opportunity, what advice would you give to a younger you, that you know now that you wish you knew back then, or uh, anything along those lines?
I think I would say not to worry, like you're not going to get it right the first time. You don't have to be good at something the first time you try it. You have to work to kind of figure out how to do things correctly. I don't know if it's like an artist thing, but like a lot of times, especially when I started on The Simpsons, if I did something wrong, I would feel like I was failing, or like it's you really, like, it's all part of it. Like I continue to fail daily and learn from it and build from it. And so it used to stress me out more if I did something wrong, and it was almost like I'd be embarrassed about it. And now it's like, nah, it's like we're all doing stuff wrong every single day. You learn from it, hopefully. Sorry, I have a kitten crawling on my keyboard right now. I don't know if you can see
No,
her,
that's fine.
but yeah, that's
Not a
probably
problem.
okay.
Now, do you kind of pull, some of the cartoons from, your everyday life, or, things that, your pets might do, or things,
Definitely.
do people try to pitch you ideas?
They do. People do. Which is nice, and I do love that in a way. But because my ideas tend to have, they're so simple that like often the ideas that people pitch me are even too elaborate because it's like more than two beats. But I actually get most of my inspiration just from friends or seeing, I often say that I take a walk every single morning. I sometimes have my headphones in and listen to a podcast. Sometimes I'm just listening and I'm kind of watching. Um, but that is where I tend to get the most inspiration, is just from people and like just daily things. Because again, like my hope is that it's familiar. Like it's not necessarily like always knee slappingly funny, but it's hopefully like, oh my god, that just happened with my friend. I totally relate to that. Like tag a person. Do you see this? Like that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to sort of like harness, I guess. And then I also have an 11-year-old daughter, and she helps me. Like she gives me inspiration.
So, do you have a favorite cartoon or series of cartoons that you've done that you I don't know just stick out for you?
My own cartoons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. There's one. I tend to like the ones that are like a little weirder. So there's one where there's a snake talking to a hose, like a coiled up hose, and it's saying, "Hey, pretty lady, why so sad?" And then another character walks up and was like, "Dude, that's a hose." Like that one I like. That's an old one. Um, and then I like there's the dog walking up, or the cat saying like, "Are you ready for the party?" And the dog says, "Yeah, let me get my coat." And it comes out and it has a coat, like a thunder coat, and it just says "nervous" along the side. He's like, "Okay, I'm ready now."
Yeah, I think that is. We've had a couple dogs like that. So
Yeah. I mean, I am a little like that. So if I could wear that coat, I
yeah,
would.
yeah, definitely. Are there any ideas where you kind of go like, no, that's kind of I don't know if I can make it work. I don't know if people will get it, or
Definitely.
but you yourself kind of like you said you yourself think it's funny, but do you have ideas where you're like, I don't think other people will get it, or
Absolutely. So many. I mean, I keep a notes app in my phone, and I have probably in there right now like 50 ideas or beginnings of ideas, or even just like what, like for instance, one comic I did sort of recently had, I forget, I don't even remember what the joke was, but one of the characters, a hamster, had a tiny cast, and so I just wrote tiny cast question marks. I thought that would be funny, but I didn't have an idea
Mhm.
for it. So I have a lot of those, and a lot of them I just, in fact, the one I just posted the other day was an idea I came up with I think a year ago, and I was like, I don't know if this really works or it needs more work. But then sometimes I just revisit and I'm like, I think I can make this work. Or it's also sort of like I have to tell myself, even if it isn't my favorite or it isn't going to be everyone's favorite, I still think it's worth posting, because not all of them are going
Mhm.
to be, necessarily like my favorite idea I've had. So yeah, it's a little bit of a struggle with making sure I'm actually creating the content, and also like, there's always the worry like one day I'm going to post and people are going to be like, these are terrible now. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Mhm. So is this kind of just an ongoing project until you I don't know things it just becomes um I guess not a joyful collection of comics, but a slog.
This is something I think has just sort of like unofficially become something I've decided I will just do forever. Like I really enjoy doing comics. In fact, I get a little frustrated when I have, because I mean, the books, when I have a comic compilation, obviously that's like, it's work and I'm making money from it, and that's good, because we all need to work. But most of the time I'm just posting comics to post comics. I like posting
Mhm.
comics, but I always have a couple other things that are my actual job, publishing obligations, stuff like that I do have to be working on. So to me, comics are sort of just like almost like a fun pastime that I want to keep doing, because I actually really enjoy doing them. um, no matter what direction I go, like if I end up doing something darker, or like something that's maybe not necessarily on brand with these I think I'll always do these comics. Like I think they're always going to be a part of me. Yeah.
Now, uh, which cartoonists or writers do you kind of look to for some inspiration or maybe humor? I know we've mentioned like the Far Side and stuff like that. Are there any others that really stick out for you?
Well, I mean, the older ones, definitely that. Obviously, Calvin and Hobbes. I really liked Edward Gorey. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Gashly Crumb Tinies, which is a very dark little, like, sort of children's book. It's like this ABC book of like horrible things happening. Like, but it's very funny. And so again, like dark for me, like for what it's maybe seems kind of dark for me, but that's the sort of stuff that I just always liked, especially when I was younger. Now, one that comes to mind, Poorly Drawn Lines, I think is really funny. That's like a more recent one that I just think is great. I really love Marlo Meakin's work. She's just an incredible artist. There's a lot of really great, just like, and since I've started, like, it's fun seeing like more and more sort of like pop up, and it's like, oh, this is a lot of really talented people. It's great that like the internet's a way for them to kind of get their work out there. So
Yes.
yeah.
Um, what, if anything, do you want people to, to take away from your comics other than just a break from, reality, I guess?
Um, I mean, that's the main thing, definitely. I do, I don't want to force people to be in a good mood or be positive if that's not where they are. That's the last thing I want, but I do like the idea of making someone laugh. There's something really nice about like just feeling like laughing even when you're feeling really low. And so I want, that's hopefully like, I'm helping people, I guess, in that way a little bit. And I think the other thing, because I, struggled, I always loved to draw, but I was never like the best. I was never the best draftsman. I was never the best animator. I was always kind of just like working and like good, but not great. And I think that I hope that people sort of lean into what they do that makes them happy and like what makes them sort of different. And so that's like, with these comics, I finally got back to them once I sort of set aside worrying about them not being the best, worrying about them not being the funniest, and just really like being myself with them. And I hope that there are other artists out there who kind of see that and they're like, oh, I can just like do what makes me happy, and like maybe people will like them too,
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to mention that maybe we haven't covered about the book or about your career or?
I mean, that's about it. I think, yeah, I think this book, I'm really proud of this book. I think it's really, really, I think it came together really nicely. They designed it really well. And there's some comics in there that I think are very funny. And yeah, I guess if you like the comics at all that you see online, like I think it's a nice thing, and it makes it's. I mean, this is probably what everyone would say, but it does make a nice gift. It's a nice, just kind of like,
Yeah.
hey.
Oh,
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
one of the questions I usually ask, and I somehow forgot to ask, is do you work digitally or do you work like pen and paper, or do you have a preference or?
I work digitally. It should be mentioned that I am really like bad at sort of progress, like when it comes to like moving with new technology and like learning new things. I've been using the same version of Photoshop for a very long time. I work on a very long time, and the only reason I learned Photoshop is because I had to when The Simpsons switched from paper to so that was like in 2007, and I was like, all right, fine. So yeah, I do use Photoshop, and I use a Wacom, like a Cintiq tablet. So I actually draw onto the monitor, which is great because it just feels like drawing.
Yeah.
But then you can undo, and that's nice. But
Oh,
my first preference is Sharpie on a Post-it. That's kind of how I got started.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So where can people find the your cartoons online, and and where can they find you online?
So I'm most active on Instagram. I have it's just at Liz Climo on Instagram. Um, I still post to Tumblr, which is the web page I knew how to use in 2008 or whenever I started, and I still post there. So you can also find me on Tumblr. I think it's also just at Liz Climo. I post on Facebook still. They're all at Liz Climo except for Twitter, or X is at ELCLIMO, but I don't really post there anymore.
Yeah, I refuse to call it X anyway.
I
So
know. I'm like, yeah. I'll get on there and I'll get on there and lurk sometimes, and then I'll, be like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, why am I even here?
yeah. All right. Well, I mean, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I really enjoyed reading the book. And
Thank you.
my 8-year-old has even picked up the book and kind of, because he's, learning to read a little more now, and so he's picking up these books that he sees lying around. So,
That's great. That's really nice. I love to hear that. I do try and make them like a little bit family friendly, just because I once I realized kids were sort of more getting more into them, I'm like, oh, I should probably like leave out some of the bad words. And so all the newer books are very, very clean and family friendly. You can show them to your kids. It's fine.
all right, well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to chat, and if you ever want to come back and talk again about anything else you have coming up, then yeah, I would love to do that.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right, well, we'll be in touch.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.